It all started with a job. Nothing fancy, just a night shift stocking shelves at the Bentonville Walmart. The pay wasn't great, but it was enough to keep the lights on, and honestly, I needed the distraction. Life hadn't been kind lately, and the monotony of restocking shelves seemed like a welcome escape. I arrived for my first shift just before midnight. The parking lot was eerily empty, save for a couple of cars scattered under flickering streetlights. As I stepped inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, casting the aisles in a cold, artificial glow. Gary, the shift manager, was waiting for me at the front, clipboard in hand. He was a wiry man with a weathered face and a no-nonsense attitude. "Jack Turner, right?" he asked, his voice sharp and to the point. "That's me," I replied, forcing a polite smile. Gary didn't return it. Instead, he handed me a scanner, its screen already glowing faintly. "This is your lifeline tonight," he said, his tone unusually serious. "You scan, you stock, you move on. Got it?" "Got it," I said, but he wasn't finished. "Good. Now, about the rules." His eyes narrowed as he spoke, and the air around us seemed to shift, growing heavier. "There are 5. Follow them to the letter, no exceptions. Rule 1. Never leave your scanner unattended. Rule 2. If the scanner beeps 3 times in rapid succession, stop what you're doing and come find me. Rule 3. If you hear footsteps but don't see anyone, go to the break room immediately. Rule 4. Stay out of aisle 12. And Rule 5. He paused, his gaze locking onto mine. If the scanner shows your own name, clock out and leave immediately. Do not finish your shift. I blinked at him, waiting for the punchline, but none came. "Is this some kind of initiation thing?" I asked, trying to lighten the mood. Gary didn't laugh. "Just follow the rules, Jack. You'll be fine." And with that, he left me standing there, the scanner humming faintly in my hand. The first hour passed uneventfully. I stocked shelves, scanned items, and did my best to ignore the faint hum of the lights above me. The store was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that settles into your bones and makes you hyper-aware of every sound, every shadow. By the time I reached aisle 8, I was starting to relax. Maybe Gary's rules were just some weird way of messing with the new guy. But then, the scanner in my hand beeped. Once, twice, 3 times. I froze, Gary's words echoing in my mind. If the scanner beeps 3 times in rapid succession, stop what you're doing and come find me. I glanced around, half expecting him to appear out of nowhere and tell me it was just a joke. But the aisles were empty, the silence pressing in on me. Clutching the scanner tightly, I made my way back toward the front of the store, my footsteps sounding unnaturally loud against the polished floor. Gary was in the break room, sipping coffee and poring over a clipboard. He looked up as I entered, his expression unreadable. "Scanner beeped 3 times, I said, holding it up like it might explain itself. Gary's face darkened. "Stay here," he said curtly, setting his coffee down and striding out of the room without another word. I wanted to ask what was going on, but something in his demeanor told me not to push. Instead, I sank into one of the worn chairs and stared at the scanner, its screen now blank. My heart was pounding, but I couldn't say why. It was just a beeping scanner, right? Nothing to freak out about. At least that's what I kept telling myself, until I glanced up at the break room door and saw Gary standing there, his face pale and his hands trembling. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Gary didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped inside, closed the door behind him, and leaned against it like he was trying to block out the entire world. "You need to listen to me very carefully," he said, his voice low and urgent. "This place, it's not like other stores. There are things you don't understand, things you don't want to understand. Just follow the rules, Jack. No matter what happens, follow the damn rules." I ran without thinking. the red-eyed figure's inhuman presence burning into my mind. My legs felt like lead as I pushed through aisle after aisle, the sound of those deliberate, heavy footsteps echoing behind me. I didn't know where I was going. Every corner of the store felt like a maze, the products on the shelves blurring into indistinguishable shapes. Clock out and leave immediately. The rule pounded in my head, a mantra I couldn't ignore. But the front doors wouldn't open, and now the hidden staircase had led me somewhere far worse. I burst back into the store's main floor, or at least that's what I thought. The aisles were warped, twisted into bizarre angles that seemed to defy logic. The fluorescent lights buzzed and flickered erratically, casting long, unnatural shadows that seemed to move on their own. I stumbled forward, trying to orient myself. The scanner lay discarded on the floor nearby, still blinking with my name. Against my better judgment, I picked it up, my hands trembling as the screen flashed. Rule 8. Do not trust reflections. I glanced up instinctively, and my breath caught in my throat. The convex mirror at the end of the aisle showed me standing still, frozen, though I was moving. My reflection didn't mimic my frantic breaths or the trembling of my hand gripping the scanner. Instead, it smiled. "Jack," it whispered, the sound slithering into my ears like a hiss. I dropped the scanner and turned away from the mirror, my pulse pounding in my ears. Behind me, the red-eyed figure stood again, closer now. It tilted its head in an almost curious motion, its long, spindly arms stretching toward me. The store groaned, its walls vibrating with a low hum that seemed to come from deep within the structure itself. The shelves began to rattle, products tumbling to the floor as if the building were alive, reacting to my fear. "Follow the rules," I muttered to myself. "Just follow the rules." But how could I, when every rule seemed designed to trap me further? My mind raced as I tried to recall the list Gary had given me. Rule 8, Rule 5. I needed to get out, to find something, anything, that could lead me to safety. Then I saw it, a glowing green exit sign at the far end of the distorted aisles. It flickered faintly, but it was unmistakable. My last hope. I sprinted toward it, ignoring the shifting shelves and the guttural whispers that seemed to emanate from everywhere at once. The exit sign grew brighter, and I felt a flicker of hope, until the red-eyed figure appeared directly in my path. Its body crackled with static, as though it weren't entirely solid. It reached out, and I could feel the cold radiating from its form even from a distance. My steps faltered, and the hum of the store grew deafening. "Jack Turner," it said, its voice a low metallic rumble. "You cannot leave." Terror surged through me, but I noticed something. Its movements were deliberate, almost sluggish. Maybe it wasn't fast. Summoning every ounce of courage, I grabbed a nearby shelf and shoved it over. The cascade of falling products and metal created a loud crash, momentarily obscuring the figure. I didn't wait to see if it worked. I ran, darting between the aisles, my eyes locked on the glowing green sign. When I reached the exit, I slammed into the door, my shoulder aching from the impact. To my disbelief, it gave way, and I stumbled outside into the cold night air. The parking lot was eerily empty, the fluorescent lights above casting harsh shadows. My car was there, just as I'd left it. I fumbled for my keys, my hands shaking uncontrollably, and managed to get the door open. As I started the engine, I glanced back at the store. The automatic doors slid open, and for a moment, I thought I saw Gary standing there, his face illuminated by the flickering lights. But then, just as quickly, the doors closed, and the store fell silent once more. I drove away, the scanner's beeping still echoing in my ears, and the weight of the rules burned into my mind. Whatever was happening in that store, I wasn't safe. Not yet. Not until I figured out what the rules truly meant. The red-eyed figure's presence weighed heavily in the air, its mechanical movements calculated yet disturbingly lifelike. My legs screamed in protest as I sprinted through the labyrinth of monitors and cables, each flickering screen casting unsettling shadows that danced across the walls. Behind me, the sound of its pursuit, a mixture of grinding metal and deliberate footfalls, grew louder, closer. I darted into a narrow passageway that snaked between the towering rows of humming machinery. The air felt stifling now, the metallic tang stronger, mixed with the faint scent of burning wires. My heart hammered against my ribcage as I stumbled, catching myself on a cold steel panel. I heard it pause. It was calculating, deciding. The silence was almost worse than the pursuit. I held my breath, straining to listen. A soft whir, like a drone powering up, filled the air. Then came the sound of Gary's voice, smooth and calm, over an unseen speaker system. "Jack," he said, "running is pointless. You've seen too much, but you don't have to fight this. You can still be part of the system. It's painless, efficient." "Efficient?" I spat, my voice hoarse. "You're turning people into machines." Gary chuckled, a low, mechanical sound itself. "No, Jack. We're transcending limitations. No fatigue, no error, no deviation. Just progress." A sudden metallic clang behind me snapped me back to reality. The figure had found me. Its glowing red eyes pierced the dim light, its elongated arms reaching out, fingers twitching as if eager to grasp. I darted to the side, slamming a random button on a nearby console. To my surprise, a heavy door slid open, revealing another staircase leading further down. Without thinking, I bolted through, the door sealing behind me with a pneumatic hiss. The red glow faded, but the thought of it being just one step behind kept my pace frantic. At the bottom of the stairs, the space opened into a cavernous room, the hum of machinery almost deafening. Rows of pods lined the walls, each one filled with what I could only describe as bodies. People. Their faces were pale, slack, their eyes closed as if in sleep, wires snaking from the back of their skulls into the pods. And then I saw her. Maria. She was in one of the pods, her head tilted slightly, her lips parted as if she were whispering in a dream. I rushed to her side, my hands fumbling over the glass surface of the pod. A digital display on the side flickered to life, showing her name and a list of cryptic statuses. Optimization in progress. Integration 74%. "Maria!" I shouted, pounding on the pod. "Wake up! Maria!" The screen above her pod flickered, Gary's face appearing in grainy resolution. His eyes were cold, his expression unreadable. "You shouldn't have come here, Jack," he said. "She's part of the system now, like you were meant to be." "No," I hissed. "This ends now." Gary sighed. "You can't stop progress. You've already chosen. Your name appeared on the scanner. You belong to us." I ignored him, scanning the room for anything that looked like a control panel. My eyes landed on a console at the center of the room, its interface glowing with swirling data. Desperation fueled my steps as I ran to it, my fingers flying over the unfamiliar controls. Alarms blared. Red lights bathed the room as the pods began to stir, the people inside twitching and jerking as if resisting the machines. Gary's voice rose, sharp and commanding now. "Jack, stop! You don't understand what you're doing." "I understand enough," I yelled, slamming my hand onto what I hoped was an emergency shutdown. The room shook violently. Sparks flew from the walls as the machinery began to grind to a halt. The pods hissed open one by one, the occupants slumping forward, dazed but alive. Maria's pod was the last to release. She gasped for air, her eyes fluttering open to meet mine. "Jack," she whispered, her voice weak. "I'm here," I said, pulling her into a tight embrace. "We're getting out." But as I turned to lead her back up the stairs, the red-eyed figure loomed in the doorway. This time, it wasn't alone. Several figures, identical and equally menacing, stepped into the room. their glowing eyes locking onto us. Gary's voice rang out over the alarms, a mix of fury and triumph. "You can't stop progress, Jack. It's already begun." I tightened my grip on Maria's hand, glancing around for another way out. There was none. The only option was to face whatever came next. I don't know how long I ran. The aisles blurred past me in a dizzying rush of empty shelves and flickering lights, the air thick with a cold, mechanical hum. Every step felt like I was being dragged further into a nightmare I couldn't escape. I kept thinking about the scanner, about the rule it had flashed. Leave now. I should have listened. I reached the back of the store, the emergency exits locked tight, the doors as stubborn as the walls that seemed to pulse with every breath the building took. It felt alive now, watching me, waiting. Then I saw it. A door I hadn't noticed before, hidden behind a stack of crates. It was plain, unmarked, and it had a keypad beside it, blinking and waiting for someone, me, to enter. I reached out, shaking, pressing the first button I saw. The door hissed open. Beyond it, a narrow staircase spiraled downward into the dark. Something inside me screamed not to go, but I was already moving, pulled by something I didn't understand. My breath quickened, my heart racing. The air was cold as it pressed against my skin, sharp and metallic. I descended into the darkness, and the hum from above grew louder, turning mechanical. With each step, I felt more distant from the world I once knew. The stairs creaked underfoot, and every instinct told me to turn back, but I couldn't. When I reached the bottom, I was in a massive underground room. It was cold, sterile, and filled with monitors, each one showing a different part of the store, the aisles, the break room, the parking lot. And there, at the center, stood Gary. His back was to me, and he was staring at a machine, its surface glowing with panels and lights that blinked in eerie rhythm. The machine pulsed with unnatural energy, casting the room in a cold blue glow. "What the hell is this?" My voice was shaky. Gary turned slowly, his expression calm, almost detached. "This, Jack, is the future of retail." I stared at him, horrified. "What are you talking about? What's going on here?" He gestured to the monitors. "Walmart has always been about efficiency, streamlining operations, reducing human error. But this store? This is where we've perfected it. The scanners, the rules, they're part of a system that doesn't just manage the store, it manages the people." My stomach churned. "You're controlling us? Brainwashing us?" Gary smiled faintly. "Not brainwashing, optimizing." I stepped back, my legs trembling. "The rules, they're not just for us, are they? They're for whatever this is." Gary's smile faded. "The rules are safeguards, Jack. They keep the system running smoothly. When people like you deviate, it creates instability. That's why you need to leave." The scanner beeped in Gary's hand, and I realized it was him holding it now. The screen glowed with one final message: "Jack Turner terminate." Before I could react, the figure emerged from the shadows. It was tall, distorted, more machine than man, with glowing red eyes. It moved silently, its limbs long and unnatural. It reached for me with inhuman precision, and my heart slammed against my chest. I turned and ran. The next morning, they found my car, abandoned in the parking lot, the keys still in the ignition. Inside the store, there was no trace of me, just a single scanner, lying on the floor of aisle 12, its screen flashing one last rule: follow the rules, or become part of the system.